Okay, welcome everyone to today's webinar on 4 ways to rock your year-end fundraising. I'm really thankful that you took time out of your day to come learn how to conquer your year-end fundraising. I know since it's the beginning of August that it might seem a little early to start talking about your year-end campaigns, but now is absolutely the ideal time to start planning the activities and strategies you're going to use throughout the rest of the year. Before we get started, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Abby Jarvis, and I am part of the team over at QGive. We are all about helping nonprofits raise more money, whether it's online or through other venues. And we really want to make it easy for you to understand the most efficient and effective ways to raise money. And that is why we are totally thrilled to have Barbara here with us today. I am looking at the attendees on this webinar, and I wanted to say, if you are a QGive client, because I see several of you here, if you have any questions about how to apply any of this to your QGive account, please let us know. I can get you in touch with the right person. We're happy to help you. And if you're not a QGive client, that's totally fine. Everything here will apply to you as well. And I think we're going to get you some really great year-end fundraising lessons today. Just a couple housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar, so you will get a copy of the recording tomorrow, so you can replay it, revisit it, send it to your other staff and friends, do whatever you want to with it. If you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to drop them in the chat box. We're going to have a question and answer session at the end, and I'll be keeping on those throughout the presentation, so drop them in there as they occur to you. And then if you're a Twitter user, I really would love for you to go follow Barbara at that handle there. She tweets a ton of great information. So you get kind of a customized view of what's going on in the fundraising industry, and she is just a wealth of knowledge. That being said, I would love to introduce you all to Barbara. She is a CFRE who specializes in training fundraising staff and board members into being even better fundraisers. And she's worked with some names that you may have heard of, possibly just little names like Harvard University, the Red Cross, and Oxford University in England. Today, she is the mind behind Windmill Consulting, and she is gracious enough to hang out with us today and teach us how to raise money. So, Barbara, over to you.
Oh, thanks, Abby. I am just so thrilled to be doing this QGive webinar today. You all are such a great company, and you have such a great suite of products. And there's nothing I like more than being able to share all of the experiences and the knowledge that I've gained over 25 plus years or so in working in the nonprofit sector. So I am really thrilled to be here today. And thank you to all of you who have carved out the time from your busy schedules to listen to this webinar. I do want this to be, I want this to be as customized for you and what your specific needs are. So as Abby said, please pop in comments or questions you have in the chat box. We're going to leave some time at the end to try to answer them. And if there are any questions that we don't get to during the course of this webinar, I will be sure to follow up by email to answer everything that I don't cover on the webinar today. All right, so with that said, so this was me a couple of years ago taking a trapeze class. I had a little bit of a YOLO year and thought I'm going to conquer my fear of heights and conquer my fear of sort of speedy kinds of things. There's nothing better than a trapeze class. So you've got to walk up this sort of rickety ladder where that woman in the pink shirt is, and it's just a regular old extension ladder, and you're strapped in. And so I had to keep telling myself as that ladder just wobbled and creaked and just felt like it was going to lift off the air, I'm totally strapped in, I'm going to be fine. And then you stand on that platform, which felt like the size of a dictionary. I mean, it's a little bit bigger, but it's not much bigger than a regular dining table. And you're, again, I'm kind of saying to myself, I'm strapped in, I'm going to be okay. I'm not going to get hurt. But there's nothing like just being told, all right, get yourself off the platform, and you have to basically just you're pulled back, and then you're like a little bit of a catapult. You're sort of sent off the platform. And that's me just gripping on for dear life, thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going probably 20 miles an hour on these wires. When is it going to stop? And during the class, that was me for a couple of rounds. And there's an instructor on the ground who's sort of calling out commands of things that he wants you to do, which was basically, sort of, tip your head back a certain way, cast yourself a certain number of times, and then basically flip over the bar, which is somewhere in that picture. And all I could hear was the screaming in my head, to be completely honest, because I could hear him calling these commands, and in my mind I'm thinking, are you kidding me? There's no way I'm letting go of these flyers. There's no way I'm going to do anything but other than stay upright and stay like this. So my third time, I think I was waiting in line to go back up. I was with a friend, and I said, I just can't get myself over to flip over and dangle from the bar. I just don't know what's going on. And she said, you've got to just stop the noise in your head and listen to him. He's telling you exactly what you need to do. And there you go, right? It was as simple as that. Stop the noise in my head, follow his instructions, trust him. And there I was. That was probably the only time I did it. But what I did hear was the cheering from everybody in my class on the ground, because they knew how I struggled with this. And I use this as a really important example of the year end, right? There's so much noise that starts to intensify now. And it's very easy to get distracted. It's very easy to start to get overwhelmed with all the things that we have to get done between now and December 31st. But what I want this webinar to be is that moment of stopping the noise, of stilling all the distractions, to learn what are the things that we need to do to really end the year on a strong note. So we're going to talk about 4 ways to make the most of the year end. Your year-end fundraising can't be viewed in isolation. It has to be thought about in context of your overall fundraising strategy. But I want to offer today 4 key ways to think about how to do that. And then most importantly, I want to talk about what do you do after December 31st? Because, we get to whatever time on December 31st, your office is closed, you sort of breathe a huge sigh of relief, and you begin a new year, hitting the ground running again. But the key is understanding and learning from what happens after December 31st, so you can course correct and build on what that fourth quarter was like. So we're going to spend a little bit of time at the end talking about that. So first way, fundraising is a year-round marathon. It is absolutely not a year-end sprint. And I have talked to organizations in the past that rely so heavily on their year end as the one time when they're raising the bulk of their money, which gives me such anxiety thinking about that, because your donors are not always, that's not their frame of mind. They may give one time a year, but if you want to inspire those transformational gifts, you want to continue to keep them informed and keep them motivated. And especially because you've got limited staff bandwidth. So you want to think about how to best focus your time. And there are incremental steps that you can take now to start to course correct your donor communication strategy, so that when you come around to soliciting them with your year-end appeals electronically in print, it doesn't feel to your donors like it's the one time of the year they hear from you. I love this picture because I just see it and I think, oh my gosh, it's those Black Friday, frenzies. And I feel like this is so emblematic of how everything starts to build in the nonprofit sector. We hit Labor Day, we hit September, and calendars need to be in place for the year end. What are the touch points? When's that first direct mail going to drop? Is it going to be print? You've got to make sure you're lined up in the queue of your printer and your mail house. How many emails are going to go out, and so forth. And events, if you've got year-end events that are scheduled. So you want to focus on how to manage and survive the frenzy. Penelope Burke, who is sort of the guru of donor-centered fundraising, and in fact, I think she coined that phrase. She's done such extensive research over the last 20-some years, understanding what drives donor behaviors. And what she said is fundraising underperformance is a failure to communicate. It boils down to that. It's not about the ability to ask for money. That's the end result. It's, do they know what you need? Do they feel inspired by you as an organization? And how do they know how do they get to feel that way? How you communicate with them. What's so interesting is 75% of donors are using the information about your organization and the impact that you are conveying. So, are you telling your donors how much of an impact you've made in your mission? What are your results? Are you showing them through stories? Are you giving them visuals or examples of how their gift, how all of your donors' gifts has made a difference? That's going to impact the donor's decision to give again or to not. They'll want to know about, did their gift make a difference? Not necessarily their specific gift, but were you able to move the needle in the issue that's important to you and to them? What are those social issues? There are likely other competing factors that affect your work that might present challenges or opportunities. So helping your donors to see your work in a wider context, but most importantly, are you making progress to putting yourself out of business? Because in the end of the day, every nonprofit wants to say, we've done our work, we've solved the problem, we are done. And so are you able to show your donors that together you're moving in that direction? What donors really want to see is information that is new, that's important, but it's concise and compelling. And this is critical. They don't need to necessarily see extensive research reports, but what are the key takeaways that connect the dots for them? We're going to talk about all this, how to do this in the coming slides, but I want you to keep in mind these four criteria. So what's now the right cadence? We think about the year-end fundraising blitz and think it's going to be the spray and pray of constant barrage emails, constant direct mail pieces, constant social media. But if we remember that year-end fundraising is part of a year-round donor engagement strategy, we have to consider that there's a cadence and a tempo of providing information and inspiring and inviting your donors to support you. So one of my go-to colleagues, who is such an expert in donor communications, Lisa Sargent, she recommends at least 4 to 6 solicitations a year. It is no longer, we are no longer in the era of one annual appeal. Let's take that vernacular out of our vocabulary. There are multiple asks that you can and should be making throughout the year, but we've got to ensure that donors are not feeling that they're being over-solicited. And how do we do that? By ensuring that they are receiving updates throughout the process, throughout the time frame, in between those solicitations. So personal thank yous and stories of impact. Those are wonderful ways to illustrate how much of a difference donors are making in our work. Celebrate your donors, so feature them in your newsletters. I was part of a LinkedIn conversation just a couple days ago, and the University of Notre Dame does this wonderful calendar where they are featuring programs on campus and donors, and it's just a really nice way to celebrate their supporters. And you can do the same in your newsletters, whether it's online or in a print newsletter. Of course, you want to make sure you get their approval and you want to work with them on what the profile looks like, but just a really great way to celebrate them. Videos are so critical because often our donors can't get to see our work in person. So videos, whether they're of the beneficiaries themselves, saying thank you or sharing updates, whether it's program staff, whether it's your executive leadership, those are really nice ways to convey, and you can feature them on your website. You can include them embedded in emails that go out to your donors. Webinars are a great way as well to provide updates. and you can determine what makes the most sense in terms of cadence. You might just offer, a 1 or 2 time a year webinar, and even if you don't, you aren't able to get a lot of people to attend, record it and send it out as a stewardship. So as just a nice way to thank your donors. In-person visits are also a nice way. Again, you're not necessarily, you may not have the bandwidth for every donor. We'll talk about that later in this presentation about how to think about segmenting this. And then research reports. So often nonprofits are across the board, and this is going to be a broad generalization, but it's pretty close to being accurate. We're not necessarily always showcasing our thought leadership, our specific specialty, our expertise. We are talking about our work in our program, but not in the context of wider sector change or wider issue change. So to the extent that your organization has research that they're drawing on or they're participating in that might be worth sharing with your donors, it's just a good way to present your organization in the wider context of the work that you're doing. You want to, depending on what your mission is and what that research looks like, you may want to just provide like a link to the research report and just highlight, a 1-page snapshot that summarizes key points. But positioning your organization as a thought leader is a slightly different nuance to talking about your work, because your donors now see your work not just isolated to you, but as part of a wider movement to solve the problem that your organization was set up to do. Invitation to events, and invitation to volunteers. Those are, again, nice ways as you're able to bring donors a little bit closer, to provide more personal programmatic updates, so they really get to know who you are as an organization. So multi-channel is definitely the way to go. You have to think about the many channels that any one of us has in our lives today, and whether it's print or e-communications, personal interactions, personal meetings, or social, there are so many ways that you can share your messaging and cross purpose. So make sure that you've got a common theme, a common message that is adapted for those different media. We will talk about this more in a few more slides, but the point is that you've got to meet the donors where they are. There's a way that none of these can be excluded. So I would not recommend doing any one of these to the exclusion of all the other methods, because we know that together, when they are combined and coordinated, produce far better donor responsive rates than any one of those by themselves. So how do you prioritize your time and focus? Let's start with understanding, why do donors stop giving? If they feel like they've been solicited too frequently, that is hands down the #1 reason I see. This is from the Bank of America study of high net worth philanthropists, and I've seen this in other studies as well. When they feel like all they're being viewed as a walking checkbook or a walking ATM, if they only ever feel like when they hear from you, it's an ask, it's a request for money. That's how I interpret the solicited too frequently, because I know that many organizations are not actually, blast soliciting. They may send once or twice a year, but the reality is, and the perception for those donors is, if they don't hear from you often, and they don't hear from you beyond just a standard e-newsletter that's going to get deleted upon entry into their inbox. And then the next thing they do pay attention to is a piece of mail or something that comes across the transom that's an ask for money. But they're going to feel over-solicited. So that's especially why, if we keep that in mind, why a year-end campaign, fundraising campaign, cannot be in isolation, because we don't want donors to feel like the only time you reach out to them is to ask them for money. Because for so long, our sector has sometimes taken our donor support for granted. We feel like we're doing good work, we're important missions, of course they should be supporting us. And we know that from lots of research that's been done, that donors give because they want to make a difference, and they give because of the impact that their gift of whatever size can make. But if they don't feel that, then they will go elsewhere. And if they don't feel appreciated, most importantly, if they don't feel appreciated and they don't know that their gift made a difference, they're going to go elsewhere. So as you start to think about right now, as we start to think about what is the plan and what's the strategy for year end, there are two things I want you to consider as you do a temperature check. So I hope that you're doing regular checks of key metrics like your donor retention rate, average gifts, behaviors of giving trends, like are your donors giving? Are they increasing their giving? Are they staying the same? What's your quarter-to-quarter comparison? And if you're in a fiscal year that's a calendar year, you want to ensure right now that you know what's the gap that we need to close and how are we going to do it. How much do we project will come in through direct mail or e-appeals? How much is it going to come in through more tailored personal solicitations of some of our larger annual donors or our major donors? Are there other foundation gifts that we need to ensure, or corporate gifts and so forth? But if your calendar year is not your fiscal year, you still want to have a good handle on where you are quarter by quarter. So right now we're in Q3, so take a Q3 comparison to Q3 of last year, and then do a Q4 to Q4 comparison for your fiscal year. Just so you again have a sense of, in the frenzy, in the busyness of everything that has to get done by December 31st, are you on track? Is there anything that you need to do differently to course correct? And in thinking about taking that one step further, who are the donors that you need to close for your year-end gift? So we know that people who gave last year but not yet this year, live buns, if they haven't made their gift by now, they are probably more likely people who give in the third or fourth quarter of the calendar year generally. You'll be able to tell that from looking at the gift dates from previous years. But this is an important group to track, because retaining these donors it should be top priority for you. It contributes to the donor retention rates that are what you need to be measuring and tracking. It also is these are the donors who have been with you for a while, right? Hopefully for a while. And if they are not giving and not continuing to give, you want to understand why not, because that is important information for you to understand. Current and new donors. So for folks who have given this year, it's okay to ask them to build them into your year-end fundraising strategy, with the caveat, or I should say with the qualification, that you're recognizing they have already given a gift this year. You want to ensure that you are tailoring that language with just a little sentence tweak that says, you've already been so generous to us this year, we'd like to invite you to make one more gift or an additional support to our work, and you give a very clear, tangible reason why their gift is important. New donors. So on average, nonprofits are losing about 80% of first-time donors. That means you're only keeping about 20% of those donors who have given a gift for the first time. We've got a lot of work to do to get them to make a second gift, and then to inspire them to make that third gift. And if they can get to that third gift, the retention rates go up pretty significantly. But making sure you are building in a strategy for the new donor, so a welcome series of communications, a welcome kit, those should be done as soon as their gift is made. But as we are entering the year end, make sure it's not too late to do maybe a series of a couple of emails or mail or print mail, which just celebrates them for being first-time donors to you this year. Okay, so inactive donors. If you think about donors who haven't supported you for the last 2 years, it's okay to include them as a segment in your year end, but manage your expectations and that of your board and your executive leadership. If they haven't supported you for the last 2 years, it's pretty unlikely that you will get a gift from them again. And there are reasons that you may want to learn about to understand what caused them to stop giving to you. But it's okay, as you are thinking about the various segments, to include folks who are not current donors and use them as a way to still to inform them of what work you've been doing. Tell them that you miss them. Tell them that you wish that they were still part of your organization, and encourage them to become involved again, maybe with a more personal invitation to volunteer for a site visit and so forth. What's important about these three, especially the inactive donors, is that with the changes to the tax laws that happened last year, there may be some donors who become quote unquote inactive, but only because they are bundling their gifts and they are making more gifts in 1 year and then pausing the following year. So you will want to really look at this group carefully to ensure that these are folks who don't fall in that category. You'll know that by just seeing the giving patterns of some of those donors to understand, and maybe you might know some of those donors personally to know if that's what they're doing. We have to rethink our definitions of last year but not yet this year and inactive donors, what we used to call SIBON, some years but not yet this year, because the changes to the tax laws are definitely shifting the cadence of how donors are making their gifts. So but speaking of those inactive donors, they became inactive, but they probably were giving you clues that they were starting to disengage. They might have started downgrading their giving level. They may have unsubscribed from your communications. They may have stopped a recurring gift or just never bothered to update their credit card. They may just not be responsive to anything that you send them. They may register for events and then don't show or cancel. So there are things to watch for, especially when you understand who's in your donor base, who are the ones who've been loyal and with you over the long term. Are any of them starting to exhibit these clues that they may be stepping away? Okay, so third way to rock your year-end fundraising: guide donor decisions. Don't make them guess. We are just inundated with all sorts of things that are coming our way through the internet. I get anxiety looking at this graph. I mean, 188 million emails are sent in 1 internet minute. So with all that's coming our way electronically and just all the busyness of our lives, the last thing we want our donors to have to do is to take an extra step to figure out what it is that you want from them. So let's think about our appeals. I'm going to talk about print first in this way, but the same principles will apply for your electronic appeals. Think about the 3 categories we were talking about just 2 slides ago: your current donors, your new donors, and your inactive donors. As you are trying to figure out who are the donors that are going to help us close year end, your current donors, are there the ones who are the largest over their lifetime, the ones who are the longest, the ones who have been giving at lower levels but you know have bigger potential. Your new donors, so again, look at the ones who self-selected to make that larger first-time gift. Maybe they joined a giving circle completely unsolicited. There are some who will have a passion for your organization, who will have capacity that you learn about just from watching their behavior, whether it's how they're sharing and promoting you on social media, who else they're involved with, if they're raising their hand to volunteer. So you want to ensure that they feel really welcome. And then there's inactive donors. So again, who are the inactive donors who have been with you over the long haul? Who are the ones who have been the cumulatively largest donors to you? If you have the ability to screen for wealth capacity, you may also look at those inactive donors and identify the ones who've got deeper potential that you want to try to re-engage with your organization. So these are some different ways that you might think about segmenting some of your communications and some of your own personal outreach, because we've got to be targeted in how we spend our time, and these groupings will hopefully yield a better return on your investment of time, because they are the ones who are exhibiting the most interest, the most connection to your organization. And when you are asking them for a gift, you want to base giving levels on their behavior, on their giving patterns themselves. So in addition to, so as part of not making them guess, you give them options for how they can give. So maybe it's a monthly gift, maybe it's that additional gift, where again, referencing, you know that they've already made a gift to you this year. You know that they're a monthly donor, but you're inviting them to participate in a special year-end campaign. Would they consider another gift outside of their monthly contribution? Other ways that donors don't often think about on their own, like making gifts as securities, especially those appreciated assets. If they don't want to pay capital gains on those assets for tax time, they might consider that as a contribution to you instead. And matching gifts, again, donors don't often think about this, but it's nice to remind them that if they work for an employer who matches contributions, that can help make their gift go even a little further. So then help them understand how much to give. There's all sorts of neuroscience that helps us understand how we make decisions. And in this e-guide that you'll get access to, that Abby will send you after this webinar, I go into a little bit more of some of the research that has been done. But there are two things I want you to think about, especially as you are crafting your messaging for year end. So there's something called anchoring. We make shortcuts all the time in our decisions. And when we're asking for a donor to make a gift, if we aren't specific or aren't helping them set the context for where they are in their own giving, they will think about, they're going to shortcut to, well, what was the last gift I made to them? And if they can remember, right, if they can even think that far back, they will probably default to that. So anchoring by giving them a gift array that is based on, and you can do one of two things. You can base it on their last gift. You can base it on their highest previous gift. There's pros and cons to both. You're going to have to just determine what works best for your audience. But the point is that you want to present to them options for gifts that are within what they have given or could give. You could also give them choices based on what the different levels will accomplish. So, in this example on the slide, $250, and maybe if they would just, a $250 gift will feed a family of four for a week. $500 will do X, and $1,000 will send a girl to school for a year. Those sorts of things will help them visualize as well. And again, keep it within what their giving patterns have been in the past. Social proof. So as human beings, we are hardwired, and it goes back to caveman times when if we stayed with, safety was in the group. If we saw what others were doing and they survived, then we're going to do it too. And so language like donors like you care about, or you see the importance of investing in, help them it gives them the signal that others are like them, or they can be like others in what they're supporting. So just little language tweaks like that help them decide how much that they can give. And leverage the matching and the challenge grants. This is really, again, drawing on on how we behave as human beings. The amount actually doesn't matter. It's more the idea in our minds that our gift is going to go further, that we can have a bigger difference. I love this example from Save the Children. Your gift will help children survive, but your gift times 10 will help them thrive. So when you're thinking about matching gift ideas, you can consider maybe it's you're going to match your challenge grant or your matching grant will match all gifts of or above a certain amount. Or maybe they're going to, you specifically segment a group of donors that you want to upgrade to a certain gift level. So maybe you've got a giving circle that's $1,000 and you segment your 500 to 999 donors and say, all new gifts at this $1,000 level, whatever the giving circle is called, will be matched. And that helps them to see a path for upgrading their giving. For those inactive donors we were talking about, are there ways that you can inspire a renewed gift through that matching grant? So make it concrete and tangible, help them to visualize it, and use this. Challenge grants or matching grants, whatever you want to call them, are a really great way for your board to step up with their own giving as a gesture to inspire more giving. You may have a major donor that you want to ask for their annual gift, and this is again a nice way to ask them to be part of it. And then the fourth way, use online and social media as part of, but not the whole of your year-end strategy. So what's really interesting is that with everything that is electronic and digital at our fingertips, according to Blackbaud's 2018 Giving Index, only 23% of gifts were made online. And what's even more surprising is that this is actually pretty on par with the retail industry, with online purchases. So that, and in fact, actually, giving only between, I think, 17 and 18 only grew about 1%. Over the last couple of years, it grew about 12%. But the point is that with all the hype and the focus on digital ways of giving, donors are not, this is not where they're flocking to. But we cannot exclude it, of course, in thinking about a multi-channel strategy. So we tend to over-rely on emails and our websites, right? It's free, it's easy to do, doesn't often require a lot of staff time, but it's not the only way that our donors are communicating or are receiving information. And I love this quote. This is a book by Jocelyn K. Bly called Unsubscribe, and she gives this whole sort of set of tips and advice about how to reduce our over-reliance on email. And I have found it really important and helpful to me this year, and how I manage my own email habits, but also how I manage my own dependence on electronic ways of communicating. And this quote is so, it just struck me because we think about this ease of sending out an email to someone. And in fact, she says it's like yelling at someone across a noisy traffic intersection as they're rushing to an appointment. So we know, if you think about our own email habits in our inbox, right, how we're trying to tame our inboxes, assuming we have multiple ones, defaulting to e-solicitations or e-appeals or e-updates is falling right into this. It is not likely going to be a way that you are going to capture your audience's attention. And direct mail is definitely not dead. Donors are 3 times more likely to give online in response to a direct mail appeal. The email is often deleted quickly, but the direct mail, think about it. How often do we just get junk or bills and occasionally a letter from somebody? So when they get something that's a really nice package, or any package from a nonprofit, any email, letter, an envelope, it catches people's attention, right? So it's more likely to stick around than an email. This is from a study that was done. They found that response rates for direct mail only was about 6% from donors. It jumped to 37% with direct mail, web, and email. So again, reinforcing that multi-channel strategy there. Another reason why direct mail is not dead, the U.S. Postal Service tells us that direct mail is read or scanned by 42% of recipients. And the tactileness of the direct mail is something that, and the physical sort of presence of the piece is something that really can capture people's attention and cause them to read in a way that email doesn't. It is also actually surprisingly effective with millennials. Millennials read and respond to direct mail segments, direct mail pieces at similar rates to other segments of the population. They are not digital only. So these are all the different ways that you might think about incorporating into a year-end strategy. We've got mail, we've got some events, phone calls. Who are the donors from those different segments we just talked about a couple of slides ago that you can pull out for personal phone calls? Have your board do some thank you calls. Have your board do some reminder calls to some of those who haven't yet made a gift. Have them do thank you calls to your new donors to celebrate the fact that they have made a gift to you this year. Email, again, you're going to build that in, but make sure that the message links to whatever print communications you're sending out to them. And then meetings. So you're not going to be able, of course, to meet with every donor, but who are those donors that really do require a more personal opportunity to get to know them or connect with them? Think about your largest donors, think about the ones who've got the capacity. This is, again, teeing up a mid-level to major gift strategy that if you don't have in place, you may start to put in place at some point next year. And then text messaging. I know that there's some really great functionality now that QGIve offers, certainly for texting. And this is something that, again, has been successful in many instances as one more way, but is not to the exclusion of anything else. So we know that 51% of web traffic is on a mobile device. So when you're thinking about the online donation platform, the donation capability, does it adapt to different devices? Is it mobile friendly? Hopefully it is, because if it isn't, your donors are going to click on that link. They're going to see teeny tiny response that they're not going to be able to read, and they're probably going to click out of that window. Is it clear, readable? Does it give the donor choices? Just as we talked about guiding them to make their decisions. Does it give them choices in giving and payment options? Is it easy to make a gift online? 65% of nonprofits require 3 or more clicks to make a gift. If it's 3 or more clicks, you're significantly reducing the likelihood that that donor will complete the transaction. The more obstacles we put in place, the harder it will be, and the less likely they will be to actually go through with it. Why is Amazon's one-click shopping so successful? Because it is super easy, right? It's impulsive. You see something, you do one click, boom, it's on your way to your mailbox. It's the same thing. Why can't it be easy and user-friendly for our donors to do the same? And then what happens after that online gift is made? I had made an online gift as a first-time donor to an organization, and the first thing I got from them was, and I'll share my frame of mind. I saw something on the news about this organization and some work that they were doing. It really inspired me. I went on my phone, I typed in their URL, I made an online gift. I felt excited. Wow, I'm supporting this really important work. First thing that comes in my inbox, thank you for your submission. My heart sank, and I thought, oh my gosh, in the letter, it was about 2 sentences, nowhere did it say, thank you for your gift of whatever, and I had signed up to be a monthly donor, so a first-time donor, subscribing as a monthly contributor. Nowhere did it say in that email that I was a monthly donor. Nowhere did it give any contact information if I had any questions. Nowhere did it actually recognize that this was, that they were excited for my gift. So the first email that your donors get when they're making an online contribution should be such a celebration. It should be a wow, thank you so much. Your gift came through. We are thrilled. But set expectations for what comes next. What are the ways they can reach you? What will they get as a next piece of correspondence? Maybe they're going to get a donor survey, so you're going to give them a heads up that it's coming. or maybe you have an event coming up and you're going to send them an email invitation and you want them to be on the lookout for that. After that gift is made online and you've done that first email, that's a really warm, gosh, we're so glad you made a gift. Follow up with a more personal email. Have a staff person. It could be just a more standard language, but it's something that's connected to a person. For first-time donors or donors who have upgraded their support, or those who are inactive, who have come back to making a gift, do want the first email celebration, a follow-up email, and then have a phone call from a board or a staff member. Those are so, they're just going to send such an important signal of welcome and celebration. If you have the functionality to do it through your online donation page, have a pop-up survey that just asks about the giving experience. Was it easy to make? Did they have questions? How, are there ways that they would like to be kept in touch with your work? Again, just as another way to elicit their input. And then, of course, Giving Tuesday. This year is on December 3rd, and this is always the big question: how does this fit into the year-end strategy? What I will say to you is this: despite the fact that last year I think it was $400 million that was raised, over the course of the 7 years or so that it's been around, they've crossed the threshold of $1 billion that's raised. But that doesn't necessarily translate to the golden goose egg for you and your organization. You have to determine, is it really worth your while? That's the noisiest day of the fourth quarter, and everybody is going to be, it used to be the shiny object early on, but everybody knows about it now, and everybody's going to get flooded with emails and tweets and Facebook posts and Insta posts, and so is this really the best time to be focusing your energy? It also may not likely raise money for you or raise enough to warrant the energy and the time. That you have to also think about the messaging. Is there a reason why a donor should be giving to you on Giving Tuesday as opposed to any other day in the fourth quarter when you're soliciting them? And how are you going to leverage the day? So you might have a matching contribution that you're issuing for all these gifts. Do you have social ambassadors who can help to spread the word and leverage their networks? But again, it doesn't live in isolation, so you've got to build the communication strategy well in advance of that. For more tips and training, I do recommend my friend and colleague, Julia Campbell. She's got some really great blogs and webinar and some other tips and tools that you can access that gives you everything you need to know about a turnkey Giving Tuesday strategy. But most importantly, don't feel pressure to participate in Giving Tuesday because it may not be really worth it in the end for you. But an alternative is, thanks for Giving Tuesday. My friend Heather Hill had done this event when she was at Concordia College, and I just love it because it turns Giving Tuesday on its side. It actually uses it and says, we know you're getting bombarded with lots of solicitations, but we just want to use this day to celebrate you as a donor. So if you're getting pressure from your ED or your CEO or board to do a Giving Tuesday event, do this instead if you feel like it's just going to be too much of a heavy lift and the return is not going to be great revenue-wise. Carve out the donors that you've had this year and just do a thank you, celebrate them, do an email blast, a social media blast, do thank you calls. Celebrate the donors who have given to you because this is going to be such an unexpected and delightful surprise for those supporters to be recognized in this way. And then finally, in thinking about all the ways that we can engage and inspire our donors, not just in the fourth quarter, but throughout the year, this is building on a lot of the things we've talked about today. So those one-on-one visits or thank you calls, especially for the year end, engage your board and give them concrete assignments of people to contact, whether it's those thank you calls I mentioned or the reminder calls, but those give them the script, give them the email template, have them do that personal outreach, because in this 21st century world, personal outreach like that is such a rarity and it's a nice surprise for folks. Site visits, if your donors can't get to your site for reasons, again, use video, that you can post on your website as a virtual site visit. VR technology is a lot more affordable now, and it's a nice way to bring your donors up close to your work. And then throughout the year, the in-person or teleconference updates, the invitation to events, the opportunities to ask for advice, surveys, are really a wonderful way to just elicit information about what your donors think about you, what inspires them to give to you, what questions do they have, and then small cultivation events. One of the things that has been found in some research that was done by Adrian Sargent that was recently released was around the power of the thank you. And what he found was that response rates went up pretty significantly in a solicitation that followed a really effective thank you outreach of some sort, whether it's thank you note or some other personal connection. And so if here we are on August 8th, if you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't have any of this in place, start to put your end of year calendar in a way that starts with that thank you, that celebrates the donors, similar to what we've talked about already, whether it's a profile on your website or thank you calls and really warm thank you notes, some sort of celebration that it reports on the impact that you have made because of their support, that can then tee up the series of solicitations that are happening in the fourth quarter. All right, so then what happens? We reach December 31st, what happens? This is the time as you start to evaluate and learn. You want to use January to look at what were the trends that you saw, what were the activities that worked and didn't work. So most importantly, first thing, did you thank quickly and meaningfully? I know the onslaught of online contributions and checks that come in, especially March, December 31st, need to be processed, and they could feel overwhelming. But don't let the volume detract or take away from the thoughtfulness and the meaning behind a really personal thank you note. Again, use the strategies of personal calls and notes to celebrate your donors. And share stories in those letters. Don't start with on behalf of our board of directors or on behalf of the executive director, whomever it is. Think about how you would write a note to your grandmother thanking her for her generous gift. How did your donors make their gift? So did you see a channel that was more effective than others? Whether it was a direct mail appeal, print appeal, or an email. If you can assess how those gifts were coming in, that's just important to build into your 2020 plan. But we talked about the segments earlier. Who didn't renew in the end? Who didn't make that year-end gift? Especially if they are in the habit of giving in November, December timeframe. They are important to do some outreach to understand what happened, to learn from them. Is there something in their personal circumstances? Is there something about their perception of you that you want to really better understand? Did you get first-time donors? If so, start with that welcome. You send them a welcome kit. Have a board member thank them. Do a thank you call. Celebrate them and get them into your cycle of ongoing communication so that you're trying to buck that trend of 20% of them only sticking around. And at the end of it, we've got the noise that is starting to intensify, but think about year end as part of this bigger fundraising plan. Everything that you do, the combination of personal and events and social and electronic and print communications should be that cadence of reporting and thanking and asking so that the year end is part of that, but not done in isolation. Don't send blanket asks, so don't send them a blank pledge card that asks them to just guess how much you want them to give. Really guide them, help them to understand ways that they can give to you, what amount is going to be important to you. Segment to the best that you can and try to personalize those asks and get to know who they are. So looking at the first-time donors, the ones who became inactive, the donors who are upgrading, those are important, especially as you build and look to build a more tailored major gift program. And sharpen your signal to lead with the why. There's the signal to the noise phrase, and you've got to lead with why is your gift, why is your organization important, why is your work worthy and necessary in this donor's eyes. And so it's always leading with the why and using that messaging throughout all the channels that will build and inspire those donors to be giving. This is the e-guide that Abby's going to send out, but you're welcome to sign up for my newsletter. You'll get access to that e-guide and a bunch of other resources as well, free resources, which will hopefully be useful to you in your fundraising. And I'd love to stay connected. If you want to chat further, there's my email address. Again, the sign up for the newsletter. And as Abby mentioned, I am pretty active on LinkedIn and Twitter. And so you will get on Twitter not only nuggets of fundraising advice, but really fun videos of dogs and cats. So it's a nice balance of education and fun. So with that, Abby, I'm going to hand the baton back to you so we can take some questions.
Awesome. We've got some really good questions, and I'm interested to see what you have to say. So one of the first ones that we got was actually around the welcome package that you recommended. And Jennifer wanted to know, what are some critical elements that nonprofits should include in their welcome package? And are there some examples that you can point us to of welcome packages that are just particularly awesome?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The welcome package could be as simple as a really nice personal printed letter, with a hand signature that celebrates the donor, that tells them how excited you are that they're there. Again, we get letters so infrequently, so something like that will really make a difference. You might include a copy of a past newsletter that just gives them a little bit of a snapshot of your work. You might include, depending again on your organization, but you might include like a letter from a beneficiary, or if you do work with children's programs, maybe there's some artwork that you can use to include as a nice little gift to them. It doesn't have to be anything that's more extensive than that. If you have something that's particularly illustrative of your work, maybe include that instead of a newsletter, but something that just gives them a little bit more of a snapshot of who you are as an organization and what you're doing as a result, because of the gift. The important thing is that it's more effective when it's an actual package, when it's a print. It doesn't have to be like anything other than maybe like a couple of sheets of paper in a folder, but it has to be print, because of going back to that tactile nature. That's going to be much more effective and more likely to be read. And then in terms of good examples, so I'll have to give consult to some good examples. If you go to SOFII, SOFII, it's a really great treasure trove of all sorts of good samples. And I am pretty sure that there are some welcome packet examples in there.
I just sent everyone a link, or the address, sofii.org, SOFII. Barbara, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I am obsessed with that website. It is so cool.
Right? I know.
And there are examples of everything.
Yeah, they're great. Some really great things there. But again, it doesn't have to be more than just a letter and one or two pieces that showcase your work.
Absolutely. We have one question that I'm going to answer really fast. I think, where did it go? Kathy Allen asked me if we have the ability to include a pop-up survey at the completion of an online gift. And Kathy, I'll say this: if you're a QGIF client, one thing that we can help you do is include a link to your survey on your confirmation page. We haven't really explored pop-ups, mostly because we have problems with pop-up blockers and security issues with that. But if you have a question about how to include a link to a survey on your donation form or even in your receipt, let us know and we can help you out with that. So that was one little question that popped up that I wanted to answer really fast. One thing I wanted to get your insight on is a question from Carlin Anderson, who asked, how do you feel about having a checkbox on a donation page that says something along the lines of, yes, I'd like to receive future communication from this organization? He said, or they said, that most donors unclick it and then they can't solicit them again or send them a welcome packet. So how would you navigate that field or that checkbox?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. So if you worry that by having them unchecked is going to pull them off of your e-blast or your mailing list, one thing to do is perhaps not have that as an option, but send a donor survey to them separately, which you will want to do at least once a year anyway, which that I mentioned earlier, that asks them some key questions. And again, on Sophie, I think, Sophie and Bloomerang have some really good examples of donor survey questions, and Donor Voice. The team at Donor Voice have developed some really good ones as well. You can send them a survey that asks them how often do they want to hear from you. So, because again, we think about it as an invitation versus intrusion. Are you going to be the type, the type of friend who sort of just shows up on your doorstep and wants to visit, or the person who you schedule and say, hey, come on over for dinner? And it's the same thing. Can you set up with that donor, or with the donor, when they want to receive information from you? It might be that they don't want that monthly newsletter, but they want to hear from you once a quarter. So ask, but the trick is having the capability on the back end to ensure that you're coding that so you aren't soliciting them or aren't mailing them when they've already said, I don't want to hear from you. Part of that question, though, about how often they want to hear from you or when they want to hear from you is, when do you typically make your gift to us, or when would you like to be solicited for a gift to us? Because again, it puts them in the driver's seat. It tells them, we want to respect that you are getting lots of things coming at you electronically, and we want to ask you for a gift when you're ready for it. So those small things might help, at least in terms of how you structure your e-blast, and then you have to ensure that the back end piece is capable of honoring those requests.
That makes a lot of sense. I know that that's something that we do with our clients as well, as we ask them what kind of information they want to receive from us and how frequently. So hopefully that's something that can carry over into the nonprofit world as well.
For sure.
Brooke Bailey asked for advice on providing impact stories and impact statements due to safety and confidentiality reasons. So her organization provides services to women and children who are impacted by domestic violence. So there is a lot of pitfalls when it comes to sharing impact stories. What advice can you give her?
So a couple things. First, just using, sometimes I've seen this stories when there's especially high degrees of confidentiality and safety issues, of using, just using different names and changing the details of the story, and maybe only providing the top line kind of nuggets of the person whose life was changed because of the program. I have also seen organizations, when they've had confidentiality issues like this, sometimes do composites. So they'll draw from different stories as an illustration. I have mixed feelings about that. I'm not sure. It is definitely one way, but you've got to be absolutely clear with your audience, whether you're doing it just as a changing the identity and changing the names and everything else, so that there's nothing that's identifiable in that story that could put anyone in harm. Or if it's a composite, you have to disclose that, though. You have to be able to just highlight that this is an illustration of a kind of example or a kind of situation, because you want to be completely transparent with your donors of how you're relating that story. The other thing, though, is, and I love data, I love statistics, but in fundraising, when stats enter into a storyline, Studies have shown that giving drops by like 50%. However, in that case, in your case, I would also use the sort of the story as framed in the way that will not put anyone at risk, and a little bit of the stats to underpin the importance of the work, or to show the impact of the work. I think in some limited examples, it's okay to put that in because your donors know that you're dealing with really, highly confidential, highly risky situations. So you still want to show that impact. And so it might be that you're sharing some stats that show the difference that you're making in your community. In which case then, again, don't overwhelm them with the details of the stats, but show them that impact and the difference that their gift is helping you make.
I love that advice, and especially since so many organizations that we work with children on a very close basis, and there's all kinds of new legislation and rules around what you can say and what you can't say about children, when you can and can't use pictures. So Brooke, I'm really happy she was able to answer that question. It's a valuable question that I think is something that a lot of nonprofits are navigating right now. So exactly right. That was great examples. We are after 3 o'clock, and you guys have been total stars. Thank you for sticking with us and for asking such wonderful questions. If you ask a question that we were not able to answer, don't worry. I am sending your questions to Barbara, and she will be in touch with you. You all, thank you so much for attending today and for being so attentive and for being so engaged. We are thrilled that you are this invested in making your year-end fundraising a success. Keep an eye out on your emails or your email inboxes. I will send you this recording and some additional resources. The guide that Barbara mentioned is in there, as are a couple of other articles. I will also be sending you an invitation to another year-end fundraising webinar coming up at the end of this month, so start getting excited for that too. Barbara, thank you so much for being with us today. You have given some invaluable information, and I am so thankful that you are sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you very much.
Abby, the honor was mine. Thanks, everyone.
All right, everyone. Have a good afternoon. Bye.